Happy Monday, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are watching me from around the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's conversation. I am Krista Bontrager. I'm a public theologian and Christian apologist, and this is the channel where I offer teaching about the Bible and theological commentary on social issues. And I do want to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by viewers just like you. If you find this content helpful, please consider financially partnering with us at the Center for Biblical Unity to help keep myself and Monique in full-time ministry, as well as our team. You can find out more about how to do that. Just go to centerforbiblicalunity.com/donate. Now, a couple of years ago, I did a teaching about how to diagnose whether your favorite institution is undergoing ministry drift. And in that teaching, I talked about how to know if an institution is past the point of no return, whether it was worth fighting for, whether it was even a chance of trying to turn it back. I know for many of you, you have watched in recent years of your favorite institution, your favorite ministry, school, university, Bible college, take some difficult turns at times. And you've written to me and you've wanted to know, how do I save it? What do I do? And these conversations and the social media posts that I've been making is my way of trying to show you and model for you one way to fight. The institution that I am fighting for is Biola University. I'm not fighting for Wheaton College. I'm not fighting for Azusa Pacific University. Those are fine institutions, and I really hope that their alumni will fight for them. But I have done 2 streams in the last 2 weeks highlighting some of the problematic issues at Biola. My friend Alisa Childers did a stream as well, and I replayed her opening last week on my stream where she was talking specifically about Biola. So if you want to check out those, I'm going to put them in the description. But as I'm trying to show you how to fight, I'm showing you how I do it. Through public pressure. Some people fight by writing carefully worded letters. Some people fight by trying to push reform from inside the institution. And I am fighting, as I said at length last week, to preserve the beautiful historic legacy of Biola University. And I am fighting to do that through public pressure. I remember when I bought this shirt that I have on tonight. It says Biola Parent. Can you see that? I bought this shirt in 2017. It was the night that we dropped off our daughter at Biola. We had just moved her into the dorm, and my husband and I went and bought matching shirts. We were so excited. We had saved all the years of our children's childhood to be able to send them to Biola. We had our last dinner together as a family, and we sat through President Corey's little speech and prayer, and we said goodbye. It was a sad night because you just know that your family's never going to be the same after that. I felt so proud and excited for Emily to have the same opportunities that my husband and I had. All those many years ago, it reminded me of being a young woman. So over the weekend, 4 of the, I would argue, the most conservative, or among the most conservative profs at Biola, all who teach in the School of Theology, dropped a video. And I have a screen cap of the participants here. It included Shawn McDow and Dr. Erik Thoennes, who teaches theology for undergrads. And Dr. Fred Sanders, who teaches in the Torrey program. And Thaddeus Williams, our very good friend. I'm sorry, I did not expect to be this emotional. This is really hard. The thumbnail on the video. Oh, Monique hates it when I cry in public. Okay, I got to get myself together here. The thumbnail in the video just said in really big letters, "Is Biola woke?" And I really appreciate all of these brothers. So in the interest of fairness, I'm going to let you hear from them in their own words. Unfortunately, they didn't address the specific concerns that we've been raising over the years. And I do want to make it clear that Monique and I have been raising these concerns since 2020, but people seem a little bit more interested now. I'm wondering, I asked Monique what her theory was about that, like why people seem a little bit more interested now than they were 4 or 5 years ago. Her theory is that people just understand the frameworks better. They're more familiar with critical race theory. They can spot it. They can spot things like liberation theology or the side B approach to LGBT struggles. And so they're just more in the conversation now than they were 4 and 5 years ago. So I want to play some clips from these brothers and then react to some things that they said. And I want to try to meet this video on its own terms. We're going to just stick with what they say. But then toward the end of this stream, I'm going to tell you an important story about my journey on these issues. So let's start out. We're going to hear from Dr. Thaddeus Williams refer to the recent public concerns as drama.
We're doing this video because if you've paid any attention to the interwebs in the last 2 weeks, you've seen a whole lot of drama surrounding my alma mater, Biola University. And so I thought it'd be good to set the record straight on some things, to be able to have an open conversation, for you to be able to see some Biola professors' faces as we think out loud together about some of the stuff that's been going on at our university. So to kick off, I want to walk us through, first off, what is our connection to the university? Obviously, we all work there. We're faculty there.
Okay, so I didn't know what Thaddeus meant when he said drama. And so I asked him about it, and he said it wasn't about us or Alisa. It was about other people on the internet. Contextually, to be honest, it sounds like it's about us. It was hard for me to hear it characterized that way, but I'm going to take Thaddeus at his word that it wasn't specifically about us. Okay, later, and then, Bob, this is at about 36, 33 into it. Okay, Fred Sanders makes a kind of, I think, a similar suggestion and about the nature of these concerns. And here's that short clip.
Yeah, the internet has made possible a whole lot of low information opinion having. And that's just, you just got to handle that a certain way, right? I mean, you don't have to have an opinion about everything. It's so tempting when you're in embattled times, when a lot of Christian institutions have caved or have compromised or have betrayed a trust that you placed in them. And you know that. That's information you actually have. Then you start reading everyone as maybe they'll give some sign, like you're in a poker game with them. Yeah. And, if their eyebrow twitches, that's a tell, and they've gone left. I understand that feeling. I understand why you'd have a higher suspicion rate. But you've just got to partition zones of your mind where you think, here's something I know, here's something I heard, here's something I heard somebody else heard, and you got to just subtract levels of certainty all the way along the line.
Okay. My computer just crashed. So I've got to wait for a second. Okay, there we go. All right. So interesting characterization by Dr. Sanders there of blaming the internet as cultivating low information having or opinion having people. And again, Thaddeus said that comment was not directly about us or Alisa. Still kind of a rough comment. Not sure who Dr. Sanders is talking about here. But for me, the combined effort or effect of these two comments felt a bit dismissive of the concerns, even if they weren't directly directed toward us. Still it did come across, I think, and this was reflected in the comments on YouTube under the video, that it just seemed a little bit dismissive, like these aren't real concerns. But we'll just press on from there in good faith that these were not personal to us. Now, whenever we post about Biola, the number one question we get is, what does Shawn McDow have to say about all of this? And so here we're going to hear what Shawn McDow has to say. Here he is talking about the things he loves the most about Biola.
So, Shawn, what encourages you about the future of the university, where it's headed?
Well, you know this as well as anybody. I'm guessing it was about 7 years ago. We got contacted through you first from the board all the way down.
Yeah.
Said we want part of the 30 units that Fred and Erik were talking about, a class that deals with three things: evangelism and apologetics, and then the tough, kind of thorny ethical issues of our day. And we want you, Thad, and me, Shawn, to do videos, plan it, and all of our students go through it.
Yep.
Number one, that's actually the only undergrad class I teach. All my other classes are in the apologetics graduate program. But number one, that told me from the board all the way down, they're concerned about the direction Biola's headed, want to value to help people think biblically and to address these issues. And the fact that they asked you and I to do it shows that they value the way that you and I are approaching these topics.
Well, just for clarity's sake, for our audience, they asked me, and I sort of, you squeaked by. I sort of.
Fair enough. I think I said through you first. I gave you a little bit of credit. That's as far as it goes with you, Dad, just for the record.
Yeah.
But that was really encouraging to me. That's fun. I teach that every semester with 30, 35 students. And I would echo what Erik said. I mean, I've taught 13 years graduate students. I am so impressed with at least the students I get in my class. They are bright. They are motivated. They love the Lord. They ask tough questions. They fill up my office hours like weeks out. So I think our students are amazing. I'd echo the other stuff that was said. Some of, in particular, the deans of our schools. I think you mentioned earlier, like our business department. That's where my son is studying. So that one in particular really stands out to me. He's doing a remarkable job. And so I think just some of the faculty that we've hired are really are stellar and making a difference. And I would say a lot of people don't realize this, but we have some of the leaders in the world in their field. Fred is one of the leading on the Trinity. Clint Arnold, probably the leading scholar in the world on Colossians, in the world, conservative, careful scholar. J.P. Moreland, one of the top philosophers in the world to influence my life. Scott Ray, one of the top leading conservative ethicists in the world. I could go on and on and on. That's what I loved about Biola, and that's probably what I love most about it right now.
So what Shawn's talking about there is a newish class that Biola has implemented in the last couple of years. It's Thaddeus and Shawn put the class together, and it's kind of deeper. I would characterize it based on what Thaddeus is, how he's described it to us, is it's kind of a deeper level worldview class where we're getting beyond just the basic definitions of a worldview and really talking about issues related to social justice and critical theory and, but also evangelism and what does it really mean to build the kingdom of God. And so that's a new required class at Biola, newish. And that class, from what I understand, I don't think I can say that publicly because it's never been said publicly. So I'll leave it at that. Which I want to restate again, it has never been my intention to demonize or vilify every aspect of Biola. I think there are many positive aspects of Biola. I would co-sign on the way that Shawn is describing it here. There are many faithful professors. who are doing good work there and leading scholars. And I've said that consistently. And this is why I fight. This is part of the reason why I fight, is that there are good people there and there are top level scholars, and we want that legacy to endure. Okay, let's continue. Thaddeus kind of picks it up from there, and we're going to hear what I consider to be really the core message that these four professors want to communicate.
For the viewers out there, it was really striking when I got the invitation from the Board of Trustees that they were committed to recognizing, sort of reading the writing on the wall, that there is so much confusion about what justice is. How do we navigate tangled questions of race and sexuality and the right to life and all this stuff? And they wanted to make sure from the top down that every Biola student, I don't know, I mean, I've been a full-timer for, I think, 11 years now, total adjunct teaching, maybe 16 years. But to see from the top down that we want to make sure our students graduate in a required Bible minor class. In 17 years there, I don't know of any class that's been added as a requirement, one that would cover those kinds of issues. And so, we talk about critical race theory and why the Bible gives us a way better vision of how to navigate the racial strife of our age. We talk about queer critical theory and some of the gender ideology. And so every student who goes through the Bible minor is going to get a rock solid biblical understanding that God created male and female. And at the end of every creation day, he says, Tov, beautiful, it's good. And then when he creates male female distinctions, he says, very Tov, very beautiful, very good. And so for me, having kids who will be at Biola in not too long, I would confidently send them knowing that they're going to get an education with baked in required classes. I know, Erik, you teach Theo 1. You guys talk about anthropology, what it means to be human. You have a whole unit in there where you're talking about God's brilliant idea of creating male and female. I know I teach Theo 1 and Theo 2, and Theo 2, we hit it again. I know in Foundations, we cover a lot of this stuff. And then in the class that Shawn, you were talking about. And so I'm deeply confident to send the Williams kids through a Biola education, knowing it's probably the only place that comes to mind in California that will send as many people through at least 4 required classes where they're going to get a biblical understanding of sexuality, a biblical understanding of race and justice.
So to me, that's the core message of the whole video, is they want people to know that Biola's Bible core is solid. And this is one of the unique things about Biola that I mentioned last week, is that at Biola, every student has to take 30 units of Bible, and you're effectively getting like almost a double major in Bible and whatever your field is. And so what these 4 gentlemen want you to know is that from their perspective, that undergraduate Bible core is solid, and that the Bible professors are teaching in such a way that is consistent with the statement of faith on male-female issues, on biblical anthropology, and all of that is very, very solid. They really want you to know that it's solid. Thaddeus Williams punctuates this ending section, the ending of this section, by saying that he is, quote unquote, deeply confident to send his children to Biola. And so all of the professors, kind of co-sign on that. And so they're wanting, by their statement, that they would send their kids to Biola, that should alleviate some of the concerns or about the drama, the internet drama, that have been raised. Now, again, I want to give Thaddeus every benefit of the doubt that, that's not a specific statement about us, but it does seem like the core concern of the video is to alleviate parental concern and to, I don't want to use the word dismiss, it might be too harsh of a word, but to put aside, that maybe what I'm saying and what Alisa is saying is overblown. That's kind of the gist of it that I got from watching the video. Shawn McDow picks it up a little while later, where he kind of describes what he sees as where Biola is positioned in the broader stream of Protestant Christianity. Here's that.
Right of center.
Oh, you have to
theologically
go back a few seconds. Yeah.
Biola, we are right of center, theologically solid on all of the essentials, but you're going to have faculty differ a little bit and debate. Back to what Erik said before, we're going to teach you how to think. We're going to have you read stuff that makes you uncomfortable. We're going to stretch you, and I want my students to get stretched in that way. And then the third thing I said is that I wouldn't send my kid to Biola to study sociology. I wouldn't. I think it's center left. And I say that because I think people are listening to what I have to say. And that's how I feel. If my kid wanted to study sociology, I wouldn't send him to Biola to do it. That's the only discipline I'm aware of that I feel that way. So I got to be honest with you.
Okay. So first, Shawn characterizes Biola as being right of center theologically. And this is a quote from him, right of center theologically and solid on all of the essentials. So again, there's a reinforcement of the messaging that Biola is solid, it's biblically solid, it's solid all the way around. However, if you want something that's even to the right of Biola, that would be Master's College, like if you want a school that advocates for young earth creationism. I thought the characterization of Biola being right of center is an interesting one. I think I kind of agree with that. And I think while I'm not a young earth creationist, I do think I'm a little bit right to the right of Biola. I thought that was an interesting way of characterizing it. But what I wanted you to also notice is this kind of reasoning that Shawn uses on the tension of a liberal arts education. And I've run into this issue whenever I talk about my concerns about Biola, and people will often kind of give me a rejoinder of, well, every liberal arts education means that your student's going to be interacting with non-Christian ideas. What do you expect? Students to only read Christian books? No, that's not what I'm saying. That is a complete straw man of my position. I am all for students reading critical theory. I am here for it. Just as I am here for students in the apologetics program reading books by atheist authors like Richard Dawkins. We should be reading the books. But just as we wouldn't turn a young 18, 19, 20-year-old over to Richard Dawkins without an appropriate worldview framework and discussion, neither do I think we should turn readings of critical theory over to young impressionable students without the same type of context setting and framework. This is my problem. My problem is not that I want to so shelter my child that they never read critical theory. That's not my position. I actually want more critical theory in a way. I want them to read the primary sources. I think it might do good for some students to have to interact with Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. That might be a useful exercise. Monique is going through the student version of that book right now with a young group of students in high school. But my problem is that the critical theory, more often than not, and I hope it's okay. I didn't ask my daughter for permission to say this ahead of time, but I think it'll be okay with her. That when she was a student at Biola, she was taught critical theory from the assumption that it was true, that it was the operating theory from which she ought to read and understand literature. That it was perfectly acceptable to reinterpret Moby Dick through a feminist lens. That is an entirely different project than what Shawn is describing. So in my very candid opinion, what he is describing is a red herring. It's not relevant. It's not relevant to my concern. My concern is not that students might be reading non-Christian books. My concern is that professors don't seem to be positioning the books carefully, contextually within a Christian worldview framework and teaching students how to understand and critique these ideas. That is my problem. Okay, let's continue with Shawn.
Is that I wouldn't send my kid to Biola to study sociology. I wouldn't. I think it's center left. And I say that because I think people are listening to what I have to say. And that's how I feel. If my kid wanted to study sociology, I wouldn't send him to Biola to do it. That's the only discipline I'm aware of that I feel that way.
Okay, so, all right, let's talk about this. Because first of all, I appreciate that Shawn is candidly admitting the problems in the sociology department. And he characterizes it as center left, whereas he's saying this is kind of the anomaly department. It's center left. All of the other departments are fine. I'm going to respectfully disagree with that. I think that there are other problematic departments. I think that a couple of the problematic departments have already been eliminated, but I think that there are still more problems. But the picture that he wants to paint for parents is that if we could just kind of avoid the sociology department as being center left, then the rest of what's happening at Biola is okay. And I'm going to respectfully disagree with that. I don't think the data bears that out. Now, he might sincerely believe that. I'm not suggesting he's actively lying or deceiving. He just might not be aware. I don't know how much Shawn's on campus. I don't really know anything about Shawn other than what you probably know watching him through his channel. Okay, so I don't know Shawn. So I'm not saying that he's being actively deceptive. I just don't agree with his assessment here that the main problem or the only problem is the sociology department. I think there's other problems. I think that we've documented what some of those other problems are in the culture, and I have more to come. Okay, let us continue. Shawn and Thad are going to make some comments here about Biola moving in the right direction.
In the past decade, and we haven't talked about this, but the four of us and many others in different ways have just been trying to make our contribution from within, seeing Biola continue its historic biblical roots and move in the right direction. And like Erik said earlier, I've never been more encouraged as a whole that Biola is moving in the right direction since I've known it or seen it or experienced it.
Yeah. Amen to that. I mean, we've been there long enough to see that, things got real crazy about 2014 and going up into the COVID years, 2020, I was doing events for all kinds of different organizations around the country, and so many churches and so many Christian organizations and Christian universities were like, how do we navigate all this stuff? And I don't think, to put it very modestly, I don't think every Christian institution got it right the first try. I think mistakes were made, and I think at Biola, mistakes were made. I'm not speaking that in any official capacity. I'm just a dude who happens to teach theology classes at Biola, but I can testify that I'm encouraged by seeing that some turns were made in wrong directions, and what encourages me is turns that have been made in particularly the last 5 years, all kinds of vital changes to right the ship that are so encouraging to me and so life-giving to me. I know all of us have had it was a hard couple of years there. And I think we've seen at the level of dean hiring, so many encouraging things happening. I think what we were talking about earlier, Shawn and I, integrating the Gospel, Kingdom, and Culture class, where every student in their Bible minor is going to get exposure to critical theories and why the Bible offers a better view of race and sexuality and the right to life and all this stuff. I've been deeply encouraged by what I've witnessed. And that's part of the reason I wanted the four of us to get together, is because based on some of the stuff out there, you wouldn't really know the insider's perspective on this. And you just sort of assume, oh, well, I saw this, I saw that, therefore farewell Biola, like they've gone off the reservation. And I just wanted to give folks a more robust picture of that. So one or two more just quick questions.
Okay, so there's a lot there, but again, they want to emphasize the good, which I said on my stream last week. There will be some people who feel like I am not emphasizing the good enough. So they made a whole video about the good. So, and I'm playing it back so that you can hear it as well. I'm going to link in the description to the whole video so you can hear everything in context, but they have a strong messaging, core messaging that Biola is moving in the right direction. But saying it's moving in the right direction kind of also admits that at one point it was not moving in the right direction, okay? That some correction has been made. And they admit that there have been efforts specifically between, I think Thaddeus says 2014 and 2020, where things got quote unquote real crazy. Now, personally, I wish there had been more specifics here, but I do appreciate the fact that there's an acknowledgement of reality, that something went wrong and the ship, as he said, needed to be righted, okay? That they're righting the ship. I'm like, okay, that's an admission. They are basically acknowledging what I said last week on the stream when I said that there are people from the inside who are trying to reform the institution from the inside using the strategy of the long march through the institution approach to reform Biola slowly over time from within. They're basically obliquely admitting that I am right about that. Now, they don't offer many specifics. They talk about this class. They don't have a lot of specifics. Now, I know a few specifics, but I can't say them publicly because I have all of these confidential conversations that then I can't talk about it because I'm always like, well, to participate in the conversation, I have to have confidentiality. And so it makes it difficult, but I have tried to say what I can about public issues. And I said last week on the stream that there are several people who were instrumental in writing the diversity strategic plan back in 2019 that are no longer there. Now, I don't know why those people are no longer there, but I do find it interesting that they're no longer there. I appreciate hearing staff at Biola admit that there have been problems because quite honestly, the messaging from the administration, not these guys, but the higher ups, their bosses that Monique and I spoke with some years ago in private conversations, the messaging to us was pretty much, it felt like gaslighting. I'm going to be honest. It felt like gaslighting. It was basically, there's nothing to see here. Or if they would admit something, it was like, well, it's just a few bad apples. They would not admit the structural problems, the things that had been embedded in their hiring practices, in their trainings, and that they had a plan in place that was going to be systematically implemented across the entire university based on principles of diversity. Of course, they never let the public see this plan. The version that was in public was very, very broad and general. If you are a Biola employee and you have a copy of the plan, the strategic plan from 2019, 2020, you can send it to me. at info@centerforbiblicalunity.com. I would sure appreciate it. I would love to know what was in that plan. Okay, there's an important comment that I neglected to make that's on YouTube. And someone said, let's see if I can find it back. If the university is so biblically solid, why would they even allow one department, in this case, the sociology department, to be center left? I think that's a very good question. Why is that department kind of rogue? Okay, I think the most important moment of this conversation happened about 45 minutes into it. Here's Dr. Fred Sanders, sharing what I thought was arguably the most critical insight, the most transparent thing I have heard from a Biola person in public, possibly ever. Here it is.
Just to put you on the spot.
I've probably been on 25 search committees while I've been here, most of them in my own department, but also in others. And what always is the temptation for a search committee is you get your 5 or 6 people together, you get hundreds of applications, and you're tempted to hire the person who's just slightly to the left of where the faculty consensus is. Like we can put up with that. It's not hard left, it's just a little further over, because that's what the stream of applicants is feeding you in our time. Mm. The problem is, as soon as you do that, you've reset the center so that the next time there's a hiring committee, you start from a position slightly to the left. No one's trying to move hard that direction, but it's that incremental change. And so it's every dang hiring committee, you got to hold out until you reconnect, not with the sociology of where you happen to be right now in the pool of people on the committee, but the principles and the fundamentals, and to hire from there.
Wow. I really appreciate that very transparent comment by Dr. Sanders. Thank you for saying the quiet part out loud, because this is the drum that I have been beating for 5 years. I even did a whole podcast a few years ago with the former provost of Biola about the hiring practices under his regime and all of the things that they did to screen people for a faithful biblical worldview, not just having a Christian testimony. You can go back and find that. It's with Dr. Miller was his name. And it's a great conversation. And he goes into a lot of detail about hiring well and the importance of hiring well, and how hiring and not asking the right questions in the application process can just be the thing that most quickly gets your institution off path and into drift. I think that Dr. Sanders also somewhat obliquely acknowledges that Biola has hired some left-leaning professors. He doesn't mention specific people or departments, but he's kind of insinuating mistakes have been made, lessons have been learned. Now, I will tell you, one of the private conversations I had back in 2020 was with somebody who is involved in hiring. And I can't tell you his name because, again, this person asked to keep it confidential. But what I found interesting about the conversation was that this person admitted to me that when they hire people, most of the candidates have PhDs from secular institutions, and then they bring that secular perspective into Christian higher ed. And I've had other deans and other people confirm that for me, that pattern at other Christian universities. So this person in the hiring process would kind of see their role as asking strategic questions of the candidate to see if they're aware of what their worldview assumptions are or how their worldview intersects with their academic discipline. And this person one of the questions this person would ask was, tell me about an area in your academic discipline that contradicts the biblical worldview. And he said many candidates were not able to answer that question in a rigorous way. I thought that was very interesting. He said sometimes this person would have to offer examples, try to help the candidate with their answer. Now, I think that I love the idea. I love the question. I think it's a great question in an academic environment. I so appreciate the process and the question. But I think that what Fred Sanders is highlighting here is the struggle of when they have all of these progressive candidates to choose from, what do they do? And that the gradual drift of constantly shifting the center has a cumulative effect over time. Now, at 46 minutes into this conversation, Shawn McDowell finally acknowledges the point that I made on last week's stream, and that is that student life goes beyond the classroom. Here he is.
Faculty. You've got to have the right faculty. That is 90% of it. 10, you need the right systems of hiring, of chapel, of residence life. You have to have systems and accountability built in. But third, just a spirit. We're talking about Romans, chapter 1:16, that we are not afraid, we're not timid, we're not ashamed. Lean into the Bible. It's true. And let's teach it, and let's live it, and let's apply it, and do scholarship rooted in what the Bible is, and not be ashamed of that to try to adjust to something taking place in culture over the next 20, 30 years. Cultures will come and go, but the Bible, the Word of God, is going to last forever. I could start preaching. I'll leave it at that.
There it is.
I love it.
Okay, so he's basically very quickly, briefly acknowledging a point that I made last week on the stream, and that is that ideally hiring and student life, like chapels and residence life and all of that, should all align. They should all align with the school's statement of faith, and they should all align in the classroom, but also beyond the classroom. This is my contention. This is my problem. Having 4 brothers who I would consider very conservative, good brothers in the Lord come on a live stream and talk about what's great about Biola, what's good about it, what looks promising for the future, doesn't address, in my humble opinion, the core concerns that I have been trying to lay out and that Alisa laid out in previous conversations. Now, in the description, albeit I can concede that they said, well, we're not trying to answer every objection. I think they probably thought what they were doing was adding balance to the discussion. I think that would be a gracious way of seeing this effort. Now, I'm not convinced that the team really answered the question, is Biola woke? I think they mostly made the case that the Bible department isn't progressive. Although, to be honest, I do have a couple questions about a couple people there, but I'm going to put those aside. But I'm not sure that they really succeeded in making their case for the university as a whole. Now, I will concede they all seem to feel comfortable to send their own children there, and that's a personal decision, and maybe this alleviates your concerns. That's great. God bless you, all of that. But it doesn't talk about the policies and practices of the clubs and the affinity groups, their lack of transparency about chapels, residence life, how they're discipling students who struggle with same-sex attraction issues. None of those very specific concerns were addressed. But 4 very conservative, biblically faithful profs came on a podcast and did want you to know that the Bible classes are rock solid. And, I said in the comment on YouTube, you can go see it if you want. I said, to me, this is the functional equivalent of saying the grass is green. You had conservatives, profs saying conservative things. And as I said before, nearly every time we discuss this, we always say there are many faithful profs and staff at Biola. These are not our problems. Neither is the problem the statement of faith. The problem is the students' experience is far bigger than their Biola classes. And yes, their Bible classes are part of the experience. There's no doubt about that. An important part. But residence life, chapels, clubs, discipleship from professors, all of those things are also a big part of it. Now, I do want to make it very clear that I'm primarily focusing on the undergrad program and culture. So please stop writing to me about your experience in the online programs or in the apologetics program. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm trying to hone in on the spiritual harm that is taking place on 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds in the undergrad program on campus specifically. Now, that's not to say I don't have concerns about the grad programs, but personally, I feel like those students generally are older and they should be and have the initiative to inform themselves. And so to me, that's a different issue. And I do have concerns about some of their grad programs, but I am not focusing on that in these conversations. I am simply trying to focus on one thing, and that is the undergrad program. So I want to end this today by telling you a story. The very last meeting that Monique and I had together with officials at Biola was with 2 senior administrators. Now, Monique did have one other meeting after that, but she went alone and I wasn't there. So this was the last one that we did together. I think this was in 2021, like maybe early to mid 2021. Unfortunately, I can't tell you who these men are because they made us promise confidentiality when we met them. But trust me, bro, they were top level people. They have the power to hire and fire and write policies. Okay, that's about all I can say. And so I asked, we had a long conversation. It was probably an hour, but toward the end, the second to last question that I asked them was this: is Biola comfortable with having such a wide spectrum of views represented in their professors? Like, you have everything from Thaddeus Williams and J.P. Moreland to someone like Brad Christensen, who oversees, ironically, the sociology department, which Shawn mentioned earlier. Do you see that all of these perspectives between Thaddeus Williams and Brad Christensen, do you see as this whole spectrum of views as being faithful to historic Christianity? That was my question. The administrators both answered my question with a yes. Well, that led to my next question, my last question. And that was this: would you, the Biola administration, consider doing a multi-year study project to come up with a written statement summarizing where Biola stands on critical theory and social justice? Now, I've been around Biola a long time. I told them, I remember when I was on faculty back in the late 90s, there was a study group put together to look into Eastern Orthodoxy and whether the university could hire an Eastern Orthodox professor. They did another study in the early 2000s, I believe, on theistic evolution. My friend John Bloom was involved in that. I said, would you consider writing a public statement clarifying Biola's position on critical theory and social justice and, like doing it in an academic way? Their very clear answer to me at that time was an unequivocal, unqualified no, we would not do that. They didn't see it as necessary. It was at that point, quite honestly, I can admit this, I was sort of emotionally done with the call. I sat back in my chair and I just kind of let Monique finish the conversation because I felt so sad and defeated. I don't even remember what was talked about after that moment. And as I said, on the last podcast, Biola has made some positive changes. We've talked about those again in this podcast. So I'm not here to vilify all of that. But as you can see, that there remain problems even after 5 years. Biola still lacks clarity about their position on critical theory and social justice. Now, Thaddeus has written a wonderful book, Confronting Injustice Without Compromising Truth. But to my knowledge, that's not an official Biola document. That's not a study committee. That's not a public statement. And I think that Dr. Christensen, if you just look for him, you can go on his Facebook feed. All his posts are public. And he has positions that I would think very generous way of characterizing them would be left of center. I think that I agree with Shawn's analysis on that. We don't have to show anything, Bob. But Christensen has tenure, and this is the part I want to get to, is that at some point in the past, a team of people reviewed his application for tenure. They first reviewed his application to be a professor there. And then at some point after that, they reviewed his application for tenure. And some group of individuals thought that his perspective on social justice was consistent with how Biola ought to disciple its students. This is what love for neighbor looks like. Just kind of let that sink in for a minute. There were people who thought that hiring and giving tenure to somebody who's left of center, and again, you can go on his Facebook feed and you can make your own judgments. You can go look at it for yourself. But they gave him tenure so that he could disciple his students about what neighbor love could look like. Now, I think if I'm trying to look at this in the most generous way, here's what I would say is that the individuals on that team that hired Dr. Christensen and other people in his left of center stream, and there were a number of them, some have left, some are still there. And when those same people reviewed his tenure, his application for tenure, maybe they believed that his approach to justice was compatible with Biola's mission. And maybe those missteps happened because of Biola's own lack of clarity over the issue, which is exactly why I asked these senior administrators in 2021, or I think it was early 2021, to launch a study committee and work toward writing a public statement. This could have brought clarity to confusion because there was some obvious confusion happening in some of these hires. I don't think it's enough just to talk about what's good about Biola. There are certainly some things to celebrate. But we also have to be clear-eyed about the reality when an institution does not have clarity, when there is no written statement about things like critical theory and social justice. Drift easily happens. Now, as a positive counterexample, I'm going to point to my friends at Southern Evangelical Seminary, who in 2020 had the foresight to very quickly get together a public statement that they posted on their website that is still there, to my knowledge. I haven't checked in the last year, but on covering things on race, racism, critical theory, Black Lives Matter, social justice. That was the right and the clear and the courageous thing to do. Biola doesn't have transparency about chapels. The administration has not made any public acknowledgement that they actively engaged in building a university-wide system to disciple young adults into social justice. And this is why I'm calling for public statements to be written and for public repentance, vigorous public repentance. Specifically, this is what we did. Here's how we did the missteps between 2014-ish through 2020, 21. Not just a silent removal of web pages, not just a silent parting of the ways with certain staff. There needs to be specific and public repentance that they actively built systems through their whole university that would have the end result of discipling young people into social justice. They hired people with this ethos. They embedded it into their training and their faculty conversations, and had their faculty read the book Wide Awake some years ago. We've got to have, if you want to earn back trust, there has to be some public acknowledgement, more than just having four guys on a podcast that say a few seconds of things. There needs to be more specificity about things. There needs to be more transparency moving forward. Okay, I'm going to read a few comments here. Jeff Davis says, just because the world's foremost Colossians expert, who is Dr. Clint Arnold, at Biola, is at Biola, it doesn't automatically mean that expert knows anything about CRT and critical theories. I can't really comment on that. But this is a very relevant comment. All right. Jeff Davis also says, yes, specific and public repentance is required. Thanks for weighing in on that. Let me check the other stream. I think we are good. All right, I think that's it. If you want to know more about Christian universities and, how to pick a good one, that's a question I get a lot. One is go look for my webinar on my Theology Mom channel. It's called How to Vet a Christian College. The other thing is there's a great tool. It's if you just Google, and I'm going to Google it right now, faithful Christian colleges. I think that's the name of it. Yes, faithfulcolleges.org. That's what you look for. It's for the Center for Academic Faithfulness and Flourishing. If you go look up that, faithfulcolleges.org, there's a great tool on there. Just click on the button that says College Guide. And you can set up a free account and you can search, and it gives you a ton of information about Christian colleges. So don't ask me. Just go use the tool, because this is an incredibly personal decision. Everyone has their own set of criteria that they want to look for. So just go use the tool. Everything is there that you're going to need to be able to get some really good data on Christian colleges. Okay, friends, that's it. I tried to be fair. I did my best. Go watch the full video if you want to see the clips in context. I've got it in the description below. Please share this out. Thank you for watching. God bless.